You asked for it, and now we're back for round 2. Pot still versus column still. This is the nerdy bits. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, whatever it is. It's actually early in the morning. I'm rising to my feet. No, I am actually cooking a brisket outside, and it is not even 7 o'clock in the morning yet. Fighting the wind, like always, fighting the wind, fighting the cold. We have a cold front here in central Texas, and I believe it's like 20 degrees outside. So we're dealing with that. So I might have to pause and go check on fire and stuff like that, but no big deal, right? So let's get into the nerdy bits. Let's get into all the parts that we didn't talk about last time. So this is the second edition of the pot still versus column still, right? The issue is, this is the super like nerdy part. Like this is, I don't want to say super nerdy because it's all nerdy, right? It's all nerdy stuff, but this one is the one that's like, that's, you know what I mean? That's a bit much. I don't know why my camera keeps being stupid, but hello, dear. Oh, you're not on the Patreon, so you don't get the video access to this, but I will tell you, and this is not saying anything about anything, but I am an avid user of CapCut. You ever heard of that place? Well, they are owned by a parent company, which is the same company that owns TikTok. Yeah. So CapCut's down as of right now. So I'm trying to find a different editing software to where I can go in there and edit my stuff, make it look crispy, as crispy as I can do, right? I mean, but the issue is CapCut was always the best because I could record video and audio separately, right? And I don't want to spend all the money for like a DaVinci Pro or something like that yet. Not that I don't want to, and it's a lot harder to learn. I know how to use CapCut. I go in there, I splice, I do my things. It kind of sucks. So there's going to be a little transition period where maybe, I don't know. I know one of the videos that the video I recorded just before this one will be going out video format as well. So if you're on Spotify, you can watch the video. So it'll be like a sneaky peek of what the Patreon sees. I don't know how to get away with it because it didn't give me an MP3 file. It only gave me an MP4 file to download. So that's inside baseball, and it doesn't matter to me, but the Patreon is the one that gets the video of this, and I want to keep it with them. So I'm hoping that CapCut comes back real soon because it's so easy for me to use. I pay for it, so it's not like I'm using the free app or whatever. But anyway, I digress. Oh, I need a drink of coffee. Yeah, it's that early where we're drinking coffee. So I don't know. This coffee cup it's a huge yellow coffee cup, right? It used to have what's his name? Oh, the dude from Breaking Bad. It had a picture of him on it, and it said something about, I don't know, something about Breaking Bad on it. I don't know. So I still have tons of notes, and I got questioned or asked or talked about or whatever you want to say it. I'm wearing my jacket in the shed. It's cold. I think it's 48 degrees in the shed. Again, not horrible without the wind, right? But I got so if you hear like a noise, and I'm hoping the mic doesn't pick it up because, I got this new fancy mic and it shouldn't, but if you hear a noise, there's a little heater in here trying to heat up this place, but it's not doing great, but it's better than nothing, right? So if I keep looking over there, that's the reason. You know what I mean? So There's not a whole lot to talk about. Not a lot's been going on. It's been pretty slow. Business wise, not you know what I mean. Like, there's a lot in the news going on. There's a lot, and we already had that podcast, and we're not going back to that one. But there's a lot going on in the news, whiskey related. That, we're just. So I don't really know where else to go with that. So take that for what it is. There's nothing new that I've heard as of today, which is not that long after the other one. So think about that. So let's just get into it. So when we last talked about pot still versus column, and I hope you guys liked the episode with Richard over at Cathead. I thought that was a really good episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, we've got a lot of really cool guests in the works coming up, already recorded, all the things. So just stay tuned. Stay tuned. Okay. When we talked last about pot still versus column, we basically went into what they do, how they distill, why do they distill, what's the differences between them, right? And then we went into some of the flavor esters and stuff like that they can produce. And I flubbed up all the words and did all the things, right? That, whatever. It's fine. So now we're going to I wrote a line where I had stopped because we were getting over an hour. And I know that's a lot of information. But somebody asked me, where do I get my sources? And I guess I don't state them. I guess I should. I don't want to plagiarize anybody. Obviously, that's not my deal. I'm not trying to plagiarize. So with this, especially with this one, you can see there's a bunch of books behind me that are all distilling related, whiskey related. I've even got a almanac. This the Distiller's Almanac from my buddy Alan Bishop, but still, it talks about all different things, distilling season, why you distill certain things in certain parts of the season. Anyway, so I researched that a lot, looking for topics for episodes, but also not going to lie, I use ChatGPT. I ask them, him, they, whoever it is, and I use some of that, not a lot, because it sounds very generated, if that makes sense. And then I go like Wikipedia and look through there. And then I look through other sources. One of the big ones is Masters of Malt is a big, it's a site. They like sell whiskey, or it's like a thing, but they have a lot of like verbiage that you can use on. And so I just, and if I haven't said any of that, and I know I've talked about Masters of Malt and all these other ones in the past, and if I haven't, I'm sorry. I should have. That is, as a report, I guess I'm a reporter, whatever you want to call it. I need to state my sources, and I'm sorry. And a lot of this is just from life experience as well, and going to sommelier classes and just knowing how these things work. Now, obviously, when we get into esters and stuff like that, I don't know what the hell the esters are called. I just know this one makes it taste like banana. This one makes it taste like this, right? So I don't really know which one's which, but I do know that they're there. So we're going to get into it. And where we stopped off, I had said the esters are highly desirable in pot still distillation due to their complex aroma, but excessive concentrations in column stills can lead to an overly sharp note. Okay, so that overly sharp note, obviously, it tastes like it's okay. When you do fractional distillation, right, you have the heads, hearts, and tails. It's not a solid line, right? So when a distiller, head distiller, whoever is making what they call the cuts, they cut it at a certain point where the whiskey tastes not sharp, right? Does that make sense? Where it's like getting into what we would call the hearts. So they make a cut point right then, and they're like, okay, right here. Now, is it an exact line? No. Now, okay, maybe, and this is maybe if you distilled, like, let's talk about Wild Turkey for a second. I always talk about Wild Turkey, but let's just do it. They have one mash bill that they use, or two, maybe. That's it. And they distill the same whiskey every day, all day. That's all they do. Same thing every day, all day, right? So they can hone it in. But you say, and they have a rye mash bill, obviously, but so you are able on that whiskey to know what the yeast is going to do with it. You will be able to smell and or taste or see temperatures or whatever on your still, or hey, well, I know I need to, on a 7,000 gallon run, I know I need to run out 200 gallons and then we cut. At that point, if you're making the same exact thing, which obviously there's going to be variances in the grain, there's going to be variances in the fermentation, because yeast, they don't work for you. They just do what they want, right? So getting them to make a 8% mash all day, every day, can you get close? Absolutely. You can get close. But what you're not going to do is you're not going to tell it, I need an 8.0% alcohol mash. No, it might be 7.9, could be 10. It could be lower. It could be higher. Who knows? So there is variances there. But if you know your still setup, if you know the grains and everything that are going in it, you should be able to have more defined cut lines, right? Why am I talking about that? Well, if you distill too far, if you start taking distillate off of the heads, for instance, it is that overly sharp note. Whereas if you go more towards the tails, what we would call the tails, which a lot of people do, they will cut both ways a little bit. Because think about it, you're going to sit in a barrel for minimum 2 years, right? You're going to sit in a barrel. So a lot of that charcoal and stuff like that will, I don't want to say soften, but it will eke out some of the bad notes that are in it. I've had whiskeys in the past and I'm like, oh, that's a little headsy, little heads cut. That's just from knowing it, you know what I mean? And then when you go too far into the tails, it starts tasting or smelling like wet dog, wet cardboard. You ever smelled wet cardboard? Concrete, like I don't know how to explain it. Like the smell of concrete, wet concrete. Anyway, it's a very strange thing. But I digress. Let's get into it because we got a long way to go still, and I'm 12 minutes in. I'm talking about freaking head cuts. All right, let's do it. Acids. So when it makes these esters, it also makes acids, because you have to think that yeast is digesting. Yeah, it's digesting. So these acids are coming out through this fermentation process. So fermentation directly results to things in distillation. Understand that. So this is a review on fermentation as well, but let's get into it. So they are formed during fermentation, and they react to the alcohols, creating esters. Acetic acid is vinegar-like sharpness. It balances sweetness in aged whiskeys. And I don't know how to say this one correctly. Butyric, Butyric. It's rancid butter. Ugh. And it's found in pot still rums mainly. So rum, they want those funky esters. They let things ferment with like weird things in it. Like some places are really crazy. Like we're talking dead animals, and they let it sit out and get funky, and they put like meats and cheese, and they get cultures and all kinds of stuff. So we're not talking about rum, but that's like how they would do it. Aldehydes, yeah, there's those as well. They are early in the fermentation and can carry over during distillation. Acetaldehyde. It is the green apple or fresh cut grass. It's found in younger or minimally aged spirits. Yes and no. Acetaldehyde, yes. I mean, it's in there. But young spirits, I think it has a lot to do with the type of grain that you're using as well. But that's... and the distillation practice. Pot stills are going to be a lot more acetaldehyde, I think. Furfural it has a smell of almonds or baked bread. It's found in whiskey, especially those aged in heavily charred barrels. So, like, that might be something you want, right? You might want, hey, I want to have this like baked bread note, especially with like a single malt, right? Let's say you're doing a single malt, you want it to taste bready. That's the differences between whiskeys, right? I don't want my rye whiskey to taste like a sherried single malt. I don't. But I don't want my sherried single malt to be bland, right? I want it to have flavor. And a lot of times they go for these esters. And how do they know they're there? Well, they probably have chemists that test the whiskey, the distillate, and say, "Oh, it has a high amount of furfurols in it, so therefore, when aged, it could." Which when you have an object, and this gets into a little bit of physics, I guess. When you have an object, it does what it does, right? Sometimes you can't make things turn out, right? So, like, let's say you're spray painting a wall. What is on that wall before you spray painted it, right? Does it have an oily texture, or somebody got grease on the wall, right? If you spray paint it, the spray paint won't stick. Or is it very porous, right? And then you spray it and it just absorbs into it, and it's like, and you never did it. Does that make sense? So whiskey is inherently, it's a product, it's a ethanol, but it has all these other compounds in it that sometimes don't play well together. Sometimes they do. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes the barrel influences those, and sometimes it takes away from, depending upon. And that's why every single barrel of whiskey is different. Every single barrel. You could have the same mash bill, same distillate, same thing. You could have 1 million gallons of distillate that tastes like a thing, right? It tastes like this. You put it into 800,000 barrels. Every one of those barrels is going to taste uniquely different. They will all have characters that are the same, obviously, but they will taste uniquely different. Some people say up to 20% difference. Now, you think about it, 20%, that's not a big deal. They're 80% the same, right? But 20% difference in good or bad. So if you have, it all goes to having a good, clean distillation, right? That's what it's all about, having a good distillate to put in there. So good stuff in, good stuff out, like we've talked about multiple times. But at the same time, like the barrel and all these esters that you're creating, the barrel can only do so much. Does that make sense? Like, it can only filter out so much. So if you have a high acetic acid whiskey, it's gonna taste grassy or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just going to. It might mellow. It might mellow out. It might mellow with water. It might mellow with petite, which is the where you barrel age water and then anyway. So phenols are another thing. They are introduced in the raw material, like peat smoking barley or something like that. And I can't. These are more words that I can't say. Guaiacol, Guaiacol. I don't know. It has smoky medicinal nose to it. So, like your Isla Scotches are gonna. Not all of them though. There's certain ones that you get these phenols from. And then creosol, tar, creosote, or antiseptic. And there's some whiskeys, even bourbons, where I will get like an antiseptic type taste. Some people desire it. It's just kind of, how you like it. And that's what's so cool about whiskey distillation, about whiskey making, about all the whiskey things, is that they are so inherently different, but yet so inherently the same thing. It's the same things. Like, you can have a whiskey from one distillery, have the same mash bill, same everything at a different distillery. It's going to taste different, right? It's so crazy to me. It really is. It's crazy. I'm back. Sorry, I had to go check the fire, make sure. Like I said, it's windy and cold, and man, the fire's going, but it's it's supposed to. Anyway, we won't talk about barbecue, but still, it's working. It's just not where I want it. So, yeah, a little more wood. Close the doors a little bit more. Get the heat up. So, phenols give peated whiskey the signature taste of smokiness and earthiness. Pot stills preserve the phenols better than a column still, leading to a bolder flavor. That's why a lot of Scotch distilleries are using pot stills. That's traditionally what they are. Now, do they use column stills? Absolutely. Do they do it for their single malts? No. I think, and I'm not, man. Never mind. Sulfurous compounds. Yeah. This is formed during naturally during fermentation. When the yeast is metabolizing is when it basically it's farts. That's what it is. Dimethyl sulfide, DMS, which so I don't know a whole lot about beer brewing, right? But it is a very unsavory thing for beer brewers. The DMS, dimethyl sulfide, is something they do not want. So they want a very clean fermentation. Whereas in whiskey, yes, you want a clean fermentation. Don't get me wrong. You do. You don't want to have like nastiness going on because it will distill over. But at the same time, it can be a little dirty, if that makes sense. The aroma is cooked vegetables. It can be unpleasant in high concentrations, which, copper stills help reduce the sulfur content. So, congeners will change during aging, though. So let's talk about that for a second. Number one, they will oxidize. Aldehydes can oxidize into acids, which then forms esters. Okay. Leading into a more complex fruity or nutty note over time. The interaction with the barrel, obviously, the acids react with the wood tannins, adding spice, vanilla, or caramel notes. So it's not only the wood lignins and stuff like that, it's the acid in the whiskey reacting to the barrel. That's super cool. Like I never really thought, I've thought about it. Obviously I don't know if we all think about the acids in whiskey that react to barrels and stuff, but when you look at a barrel, it's just wood, right? That's basically all it is. I mean, it's hand-picked wood. I get it. But it's just wood. But wood is made of cellulose, and cellulose in itself is sugar, right? And its lowest form, like, just stop. I'm not trying to be a scientist. I'm just trying to relay the information, right? So when I know that the vanillins are in the wood, and the toffee notes and all those things are in the wood from charring and what is the other one? Oh my God, toasting. I guess I need toast this morning. It's an early morning, guys. Like, give me a break for a minute. Phenols will mellow, blending in the spirit into softer smokiness, and a good expression of that is, and I know this isn't for everybody. This really isn't. If you enjoy peated scotches, try Ardbeg, right? Wee Beastie. It's a 5-year-old Ardbeg, right? Try that, and then get Ardbeg 10. You will notice very easily that the peat notes, that briny, smoky, almost like attacking you type astringency and all of that is very sharp, and it's very extreme on the Wee Beastie because it's 5 years old. So you double that, and then you see that in the 10, it's still there, but it's mellowed, it's softer, it's smoother. And the further you get down that road, like the longer it sits in the barrel, the less and less it'll get. Does that make sense? So like I got the pleasure to get a bottle of Springbank Now, Springbank, we've talked about Springbank in the past. Springbank is from Campbelltown, which is a region of Scotland, and it's more like burning tire and medicinal, type smoke and phenols, right? Well, I got a Springbank 18, and they make even older age stated ones like 21, whatever. Obviously, those are the more you get, right? So the 18 year, which I had the 12 and tried a sample of the 10. The 10 was really good. It was just, it was smoky and it was peated, very peated, but it's almost like bacon blue cheesy, right? Well, at the 18 year mark, it's still, it's there. It's there. You can taste it, but it's more subdued and it's calmer. And it's like, then you start picking out like the really light notes out of the whiskey, like the honeysuckle and the vanillins and the jam and stuff like that, especially if they sherry finish it or something like that. I don't know. It's a really cool experiment to do. And I know people aren't into smoky whiskeys all the time. I get that. But like if you are, or if you're dipping a toe into it, the older age stated whiskeys are going to be less phenolic. In my opinion, there are some. I'm sure there's probably breaking rules everywhere. There's probably one whiskey out there that's freaking knock your head off and it's 30 years old. I don't know. I got the pleasure to try Lafroig 25, a very small sample of that, of course, and it almost didn't taste peated. It tasted mineral. Like it had a minerality, and it was like cast strength at like 45% alcohol. Yeah. Because in Scotland, like we've talked about before, and other regions, you actually lose proof in the barrel. You don't gain proof. So I guess they start high and get low or whatever. But the bad thing is like you can't really add that much water to it because it has to stay 40%. There are some whiskeys that are so old they go below the 40% threshold. So they have to put them in blends, which sucks because I'm sure it's amazing whiskey, but it's not actually considered whiskey because it went below the threshold of 40% alcohol. So it can't be sold as whiskey. Now, is it whiskey? Obviously it's whiskey, right? It would be a distilled spirit specialty 800-year-old Scotch, whatever. I don't care. I'm not talking about the legalities of it. Well, I am, but like the whiskey is still whiskey. It's just legally it has to be 40% alcohol to go into a barrel, but you can blend with it, right? As long as it's the same type, you know what I mean? Because like you can't, this is getting into rolling, I guess a little bit, but it's fine. So you can't blend, two separate whiskeys together and call it said whiskey, right? You couldn't, as far as I know, and if I'm wrong, please let me know. I couldn't blend, if I was the blender for Jack Daniels, for instance, I couldn't blend Jack Daniels Old Number 7 with Jack Daniels Rye. You can't blend those together. It would be a different product. I could blend Jack Daniels Old Number 7, the mash bill for that, with some other barrel that's the same mash bill, but when you change mash bill, it changes what the whiskey is. That's why you see sometimes you'll see these things called boo ryes. It's a bourbon and a rye mixture. And most of the time the bourbons are high, what we call high rye bourbon, like over 15%, I think. And then the ryes are actually a minimum 51% rye. Not always. It's not always the case, right? So it's like this one's basically bourbon and this one is bourbon. So it's like it's really bourbony. Anyway, whatever. Shut up. So the other thing, evaporation, that can change higher alcohols like fusel oils. They evaporate, leaving behind the smoother spirit, which, we don't say smooth, but still. So evaporation can actually change the way that the esters and the phenols and stuff like that work. You know what I mean? Hold on. Very sorry. I heard a loud noise and I thought something was happening outside. I'm freaking out. It's just now beginning to be a little bit daylight, like barely. So the evaporation in the barrel of the alcohol or of the water, like kind of filters out some of those congeners and esters. In whiskey, the esters are fruity notes like apple, banana, or pear. The phenols are smoky, earthy, and the fusels, they add weight and nuttiness, especially like in a pot still bourbon or something like that. You're going to get like a weightiness. Have you ever, if you hear me say tasting notes, it tastes thick. It's not thick, right? There's nothing in it other than ethanol and wood tannins and stuff like that. So it's not thick, but you can see it's viscous and it like clings to the glass and it doesn't move, right? That is brought upon by the fusel oils that are inside the whiskey, which is really cool. So vodka, on the other hand, has little to no contribution. It is neutral, clean, crisp. There's nothing in there, right? We're just knocking them out, brother. Okay. Now is the moment we've been waiting for. 31 minutes in. We're going to do it. We're going to talk about the congeners in specific whiskey brands. Yeah, we are. We are going to talk about those said congeners. But first, I want to talk to you about our sponsor. Yeah, I do. I want to talk to you about Texas Whiskey Festival. Have you ever been to a festival, right? A whiskey festival, that is. It's really fun. So one of the things that the Texas Whiskey Festival especially does is they like showcase all of these different brands and they really put them on a pedestal. So you'll be able to see 30 to 40 different Texas-based whiskey distillers or producers. They don't have to be certified Texas whiskey. They just have to be a Texas-based whiskey place. So that's kind of cool. So you can see some of the other ones that you wouldn't normally see. Texas is a huge growing whiskey frontier. Obviously, I talk about it all the time. But the festival in itself is so much fun because you walk around. It's been at the same place for a number of years. You walk around there. It'll be in Bee Cave, Texas, at the Star Hill Ranch on April 12th. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So VIP tickets are going now. They are on sale. Go to texaswhiskeyfestival.com and pick you up some. The cool thing about it is they have like dueling pianos at the end of the night. Everybody is there for you, and they are there to explain their brand. They are there to give you a pour, obviously, and it's just a lot of fun. You meet like-minded people, and if you go once or twice, you meet friends, and that's super cool. And I can't wait to go. And I thank the Texas Whiskey Festival for sponsoring. Let's get back to the regularly scheduled program. All right, so each whiskey distillery carefully balances congeners to create a signature flavor profile. Okay, so for bourbon, Maker's Mark, they like to eke out certain esters for sweet and fruity notes from their soft red winter wheat in their mash bill. They have minimal phenols. They focus on caramel and vanilla notes. Their yeast strains are selected for mild ester production so that it will enhance the sweetness. You get where that's going? So like Maker's Mark, it's going to be a really sweet bourbon. Now, it's not going to be sugar added to it. It'll just be a rather sweet bourbon comparatively, right? The barrel tannins aren't taking over and stuff like that. And you don't have that rye kick. Rye sometimes it gets spicy. They say it's spicy, right? The second one on here is Four Roses, right? We've talked about Four Roses in the past. They get these certain esters out that are more like pear and apple because they have how many? 5 different yeast strains that they use and 5 different mash bills. And so they also seek out fusel oils to contribute to an oily, rich mouthfeel. Now, it depends upon the mash bill and upon the yeast strain. And so everybody has their preferred EVOS and whatever. I don't even know what they are. One is a high rye, one's a low rye, one's a whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I like Four Roses. I think they're doing amazing things, and I'm glad that they remember we talked about Four Roses in the past. I'm glad that they are focusing more on American soil. We all got to outsource. I get it. We got to get whiskey in hands of everybody, right? World domination is what whiskey's all about, right? Oh, wait. Yeah. So let's talk about Scotch for a second. Why not, right? So Lefroy, their phenols are high levels of glycol. I can't say the word. You know which one I'm talking about. And creosol for its signature medicinal and smoky aroma. They love the aldehydes because they give a green apple note behind the smokiness. So it's very layered, right? You have the smokiness, but then the green apple comes in. They design their yeast to highlight the earthy and smoky phenols. So, and after a while, the yeast just changes. You know what I mean? It just changes and it becomes, it incorporates into the whiskey, if that makes sense. The second one is Macallan. It's an unpeated single malt, obviously. They seek out esters in their whiskey that is more like fig or raisin. They have longer fermentations as well. So you see what I'm saying? Like a good brewer or whoever is your guy, right? That's working the fermentation. He's like, what are we trying to make? Okay, we're trying to make something funky. Let's do this to it, right? And they know what to do with said things that they have to do. They look for the almond and break bread notes and the aldehydes, right? And they age a lot in sherry casks. Well, when you age in a sherry cask, obviously it had sherry in it before. Might still have some in it too. Anyway, and they age in it. So they're getting the sulfurous notes as well. And I'm sure that contributes to the whiskey, obviously. But it also helps it get that almond note or that, baked bread or what they're trying to get. So you just have to you have to know your product, know what barrel you're putting it in, and hope that the outcome is just what you want, which, as like we said before, it's going to do what it's going to do. Maybe you can blend it out. Who knows? But the yeast is there to balance it and up the fruitiness. So they get a fruitier yeast, right? Macallan has a huge yeast line. There's a lot of whiskey distilleries that use their yeast because it does produce those fruitier esters, and it's very good for single malts. It's called M1 yeast. People say it's changed, but I don't know. I don't know anything about it. Let's talk about Redbreast, but I need to drink a coffee real fast. We're getting there, guys. Redbreast. So they're an Irish whiskey, right? And a lot of Redbreast is pot stilled. They do have other offerings. It's mainly pot stilled though. They seek out tropical fruits like pineapple, stuff like that during their triple distillation. So triple distillation, again, different. It does soften the spirit. It does eke out some of those esters and stuff because you are distilling it 3 times. So it's not a full column still, right? It's not column still distillation, but it is taking some of those congeners, changing them, heating them up again, manipulating them, taking some of them out. And that's why a lot, and I'm not saying every one, the triple distilled Irish whiskeys, most of the time, are softer and fruitier and very mellow. Their future oils are subtle nuttiness due to the minimal congeners of its pure distillation practice. The yeast is there to add floral and honeyed esters. So very basic, nothing funky on that aspect, right? And so Jameson on the on the other hand, the Jameson is both pot distilled and column distilled. It's a blend, right? So their esters are pear and green apple. So you know, and the phenols, they are almost non-existent because they want to have a smooth, clean finish on it. And the yeast is basically just a neutral, what we would call a daddy yeast. It's distiller's yeast, which it doesn't really produce any ester. I mean, it does. Every yeast produces esters and phenols and all the things, right? Not phenols, but you know what I mean. Every yeast produces something. So just understand that. So yeah, the Jameson is going to be kind of a wild card with that because it is a blend of whiskeys. So if you were to get the single malt part of it, it could be a little fruitier and stuff like that. But since you're blending it with a column distilled or whiskey, it does change it. It's good. I like Jameson. Let's talk about some rye whiskey, and of course, Wild Turkey rye. The esters are strong spice and fruit notes like apricot and citrus. Their fusel oils add robust, oily mouthfeel to it, and the phenols are minimum. They focus on the spiciness from the rye grain. Okay, so the rye grain itself, if you've ever had just rye, just tasted rye or had rye bread, you can taste that it is very flavorful, right? It has a very strong flavor. So, but Whistle Pig, on the other hand, is floral and fruity due to the long fermentation, and it's Canadian rye. Now, what does that mean? That doesn't mean anything other than it was distilled in Canada, right? So, it can be the same rye, but I don't know if it's not column distilled. I'm not certain with that. And it has subtle nuttiness and grass notes for its aldehydes. Yeah, I mean, to me, rye whiskey, there's a lot, like different types of rye present totally different. You malt the rye, it tastes way different. You know what I mean? It's really strange. Rye, I'm really getting into rye whiskey, and there's a lot out there. There really is. There's a lot of stuff going on out there. It's really cool to see it kind of come into its own, the resurgence, if you will. Check that podcast out too. So yeast isn't just about converting starch into alcohol, sugar into alcohol. Its main driver behind creating a creation of congeners. Different strains of yeast produce varying amounts of esters, acids, and higher alcohols. For example, fruity yeast strains are commonly used in Scotch to enhance the esters, while neutral yeast strains are preferred for vodka to reduce the congeners. Also, fermentation conditions. We didn't talk about that. They can alter the congeners. So fermentation temperatures. Higher temperatures increase the esters and fusel oil production because you're basically heating the yeast up, and they're like, it's hot. They're not saying that, but and time. Longer fermentations allow more complex esters to form. And nutrients. A well-fed yeast. Now, yeast doesn't just want to eat the sugar. They need other things. They need fuel, right? A well-fed yeast, and they need oxygen. They need a lot of oxygen because it's very strange. Like yeast are very, we've talked about this at length, but yeast are very strange things. Super cool. But when you're making a mash or making a thing, at the very beginning of that, you want to have a bunch of oxygen in the mash because that's what makes the yeast thrive, right? They multiply, they get busy, if you know what I'm saying. And then they create more and more yeast. Next thing you know, you have a thriving yeast culture that goes in there and eats that sugar, makes all those esters that you want. So a well-fed yeast culture produces more balanced congeners, while a nutrient deficient can create off flavors. That's true. That's true. what I realized? I had my headphones on backwards the whole time. I was wondering why it was like, yeah, it was hurting my ear a little bit. All right, so we talked about the congeners. We've talked about all the things. To me, the only other example that I can give you would be like the differences between column still and pot still. And we've already talked about it. The difference is column still is going to be a lighter profile. It's going to be more like vodka. I hate to say it. It's going to be more vodka-esque. It's going to just be clear, more neutral spirit. Whereas a pot still is going to give all of those flavors, all of the things coming over, good and bad. So there is something to be said about column distillation in that it is efficient. It is very clean. It makes it makes good whiskey. I mean, most of the Kentucky bourbons that not just Kentucky, but most of the bourbons that you drink are column distilled. So it doesn't make bad whiskey, but when you have a pot still whiskey sit next to a column distilled whiskey, you can tell the difference. You just can. It's just oilier. It's just more viscous. There's something about it. Is it better? I can't say that because it's flavor, right? It's like, I like chicken fried steak. You don't like chicken fried steak. You want the chicken fried chicken, right? I'm not going to say that mine's better than yours, right? Do I prefer one over the other? Yeah, I like pot still. But like, because that comes from like, if you were to column distill single malt, it would have little to no flavor. It's those esters and congeners coming over that give it its flavor, I think personally. And that might be fallacy in the distilling world right now, but like, see, because what a lot of especially scotches and stuff like that, when they do a blended scotch, they will get neutral grain spirit, which is still their spirit, right? Distilled to almost vodka, and they will blend it with their whiskey and put it in barrels or barrel them separately. Sometimes it depends. Like in Canada, they don't have to, but some of the practices they do is they barrel everything separately, every distillation, the corn, rye, whatever, and then they will distill to like light whiskey, what we would call light whiskey here, above 80% alcohol. They will distill it higher. What does that do as well? Well, it strips out more things. That's why they want the whiskey tastes the way it tastes because of the parameters that were put in line. And because everybody's like, man, this makes good spirit. Because they did the testing and it took forever. Like, just think about it. What happens if you put 95% alcohol in a barrel? Right? What if you put vodka? But I meant vodka off the still, not proof down. It's going to evaporate. That's all it's going to do. You're going to have angel share. That's it. Might as well call that barrel angel share. Because it's all of it's going to evaporate besides the 5% water. You'll have 5% of water in there, which no, you won't, but still. That's why the small barrels, they don't work well. The little, ones you get from the Trader Joe's or whatever, or Kirkland's, whatever you want to call it, they don't work. Now, the bad motivator barrels, they were engineered to work like a 53-gallon barrel. And I thank them for sponsoring as well. But it's very strange, that the way the distillation practice makes the whiskey taste the way it is. Okay, that's obvious. But there's also so many other factors in cool whiskey. And that's what I want to get down to the brass tacks of, right? Figuring out what specific thing makes that taste like this. And it could be a number of things, right? It could be the esters, the phenols, all of the things combined together to make said whiskey taste like it does. You know what I mean? Like I am beginning, and I mean, I've been on this journey for a minute. I am beginning to understand the influence of sherry on single malts. Beginning. And I am beginning to understand the influence of, say, Amberana on a bourbon. I'm beginning to. Now, each Amberana finished bourbon that you have is inherently different, right? It's not the same. Could be a different mash bill, could be a different distillate, could be from MGP, who knows, right? So you're taking that and putting in how long was it on the Amberana? Was it toasted Amberana? What is it? Raw Amberana? That all makes a difference, right? Was it Amberana spirals? Was it an actual barrel of Amberana? What was it, right? All of those things make a difference in the whiskey, right? So that talks about finishing, right? But those are flavors that come over as well, right? And we've talked about finishing multiple times, but that segues me into finding, and I'll give you guys some homework. How about that? Find, and I don't, I'll try to look up some pot distilled bourbons, especially because single malts are fairly easy to find. Some pot distilled bourbons to compare to some column distilled bourbons. And you can just kind of taste the flavor difference. I know not everybody likes the flavor profile of Balcones, right? There's some people that just don't like it. But their pot distilled bourbon is obviously pot distilled, right? So it's like trying that against a Elijah Craig, right? You'll taste the difference. Now, obviously, it's a Texas whiskey, so it's going to taste like a Texas whiskey. But it's also the oiliness, the richness, the viscosity of it is different. Take that for what it is. I don't know of too many pot distilled bourbons that are out there. I will try and find some and let you know. But do your research and that's the thing. That's, if you're listening to this, that's part of why you're listening, right? Is if you see a bottle, let's say, there's that one that came out this last year that was supposed to be really amazing, like Smoke Eye Hill, I think is what it was called. It was a blue corn bourbon. It was supposed to beat out Pappy and George T. Stagg and all of these guys. And I don't know, I never tried it, and then that's also something else that can totally change the flavor of said whiskey. Not only the esters, the congeners, all the things that are in there, the barrel, the yeast, but guess what? The grain itself can change. You put blue corn in there, you put red corn, you put green Oaxacan green corn, you put malted rye, not malted rye, chocolate malt. All of that is going to change the flavor of it. I guarantee it. So just understanding that, it makes a difference. So before I go, I need to talk to you about one other sponsor. I didn't forget. I got to space them out a little bit. I don't want you getting sponsor overload. I'm sure you guys listen to other podcasts, right? Not just whiskey, right? You listen to other podcasts, and there's sometimes they will have, and I know some of those are like the monetized ads that are like somebody else, like Blue Chew or somebody's coming on and talking to you. The one that I've seen lately is about this guy. He's like, helps you how to garden, teaches you how to garden or something. Anyway, long story short, I don't like it when I'm listening to a podcast and there's like 7 ad reads in a row. And I'm like, oh my God, get back to it. Right. So I want to talk about our sponsor. Speaking of that, right? Hinterhaus. Yeah. Hinterhaus Distilling. They are out of Arnold, California. And as of right now, they have their batch 4. Yeah. Batch 4 is out. Go get it. HinterhausDistilling.com. It is an American single malt, the one part of their Discovery series. This one is aged 20 something months. And from what I've heard, haven't got me a bottle of it yet. It's coming. but from what I've heard, this thing is bee's knees. The batch 3 is, if it's not sold out, it's almost sold out. So they're thinking batch 4 is going to be really close to that. So selling out really fast. So go get you some. Go to hinterhofdistilling.com. These guys are grain to glass. They're doing everything in their power to make good whiskey and make it the way it should be, or what they think it should be, and what I think it should be. Like I want to know where my grain is grown. I want to know who's had their hands in it, right? Who's had their dirty, nasty hands in my whiskey. And these guys are trying to do everything grain to glass as much as they can, which is super awesome. But they also have bourbons and a rye and some cordials and vodkas and gins and all kinds of stuff. So go to hinterhofdistilling.com and pick you up that batch 4 right now. All right. I got to get out of here, man. It's cold. I need to go in the house. I need to go get some more coffee. You know what I mean? So I hope that this kind of gives you the overview of pot still versus column. I hope that the esters and congeners and all those things didn't blow your mind, because they did blow mine. And I appreciate all of you for being here, for listening, for sticking with me this long. I can't thank you enough. And I thank all of my sponsors, not only them, but Bad Motivator Barrels and Z Smith Whiskey and Mixology. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring me and taking a chance with a little podcaster dude like me. So I appreciate that. And of course, I thank my Patreon. Go to patreon.com/thewhiskeyshaman. If you find value in these podcasts or any of the things that I do, I also do YouTube-y things and Instagram-y things and whatever. So go check me out. One of the things you can do is give me a 5-star review. If you find value in this and you don't want to support monetarily, a 5-star review. That really helps, because it helps other people. With every 5-star review, they release it to other people to where they can see or listen to the podcast. And so the more 5-star reviews I have, the more outreach I can get, the better content I can produce, and then the better guests I can talk to. It's a symbiotic relationship that we have. So if that's something you want to do, please do. And I thank you all so very much for hanging out with me, for all the love and the support. And you know what to do. Until next time, keep your spirits up.